Hey, good morning, Campbell. How's everybody doing this morning? Good. It's good to see you. It is good to see families back together. We've had a lot of illness go around, and it was great this morning to see families coming in together, everybody well. That's good to see. If your family isn't at that stage yet, we'll continue to pray. Also, great to meet some guests this morning. We know we've got people here who are visiting families, so they're from out of town, but also guests from the community. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're honored by your presence. If I didn't have the chance to meet you this morning, I hope I have the opportunity before you leave here today, but we hope this is a good experience for you today. Well, here's a quote that you might be familiar with. Hell has no fury like a woman scorned. Now, I have no idea who inspired the English playwright William Congreve to pen those words. But if there is ever a person those words could have been spoken of, it was a woman that was married to a man by the name of Potiphar. Even though she was married to one of the most powerful men in all of Egypt, she was smitten by a drop-dead, gorgeous household servant by the name of Joseph. And day after day, she made her desires known to this young man. Her pickup line went like this: come to bed with me. Not too subtle, right? I mean, you don't have to be a genius to kind of get the drift of what she's after there. Now, if Joseph would have been your typical testosterone-filled 20-something-year-old, he probably would have said, no problem, I'm more than happy to oblige, for a number of reasons. But he wasn't your ordinary Joe. And so time and time again, he said no. And he rejected her. And because he did, this woman scorned made his life a living hell. The story is recorded for us in Genesis chapter 39, beginning in verse 11. One day he, Joseph, went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. Look, she said to them, this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. And when he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. And then she told him this story. That Hebrew slave you brought us came to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. And when his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. Joseph acted with utmost integrity. He didn't sleep with a woman, let alone even flirt with her. And what did that get him? It landed him in a dungeon prison on trumped-up attempted rape charges. That's a rough go. It's a charge that he couldn't even fight, being as he was just merely a Hebrew slave with no rights or voice in the empire. And even though he was assigned to the place where the king's prisoners were kept, it was definitely no walk in the park. In fact, the psalmist, years later, would look back upon that event and would describe what life was like for Joseph in that dungeon prison, at least initially. The psalmist writes this in Psalm 105, verse 17 and 18. He sent a man before them, Joseph, sold as a slave. They bruised his feet with shackles. His neck was put in iron. And so you get the image what Joseph is going through. And is this the way the story should go? Absolutely not. In my opinion, Joseph should be praised, not penalized for doing the right thing. But this is one of the ugly realities of living in a broken world. Just because you choose to do what is right does not mean that life is going to turn out right. You can do everything right in life, but still be the one who gets the blame for a younger sibling's behavior, for a prankster classmate, for a lazy coworker, for a flaky spouse. And I know this to be true because, to be honest with you, in my younger years of life, I was pretty adept at shifting blame. Now, I have long since repented, but there are a few people that I knew in elementary school that I pray that I never crossed paths with in a dark alley. They would have every right to take it out on me. At the same time, like many of you, I've been sold down a river or two that I've never stuck my toe in. And that's not fun, is it? It's those types of experiences in life can leave a very sour taste in your mouth about humanity. That's only compounded when the people who really could help you out, the people who could ask the right questions, the people who could come to your defense, the people who could bail you out, those people choose to simply remain silent and watch the injustice go down. And that's exactly what Potiphar did to Joseph, isn't it? Now listen, do you really believe that he bought the lie or the story that his wife was selling? And part of us probably reads that text and says, well, it does say that he became very, very angry, right? Yes, he did, but have you ever stopped to consider who he was angry at? No doubt he was upset with the whole ordeal, but I have to believe that he was primarily angry at his wife. Now, let me explain why I believe that. I believe that because he made the decision to allow Joseph to be sentenced to the king's prison. If he was truly upset with Joseph, he wouldn't have done that. He would have what? He would have had him executed. That's the punishment that crime deserved. And if there's anyone who could have made that happen quickly, it was Potiphar. He was what? He was captain of the guard, but many people believe, widely held, that he was the chief executioner. He could have made sure that Joseph's life was taken just like that, no questions asked, but he didn't. And not only that, but we learn later in the story that he entrusts Joseph to take care of some royal prisoners who are in prison with him at the same time. Now, if he honestly believed that this man had forced his way onto his wife, would he have made that decision? I don't think so. So the question becomes, why didn't he defend Joseph? Why didn't he stand up for him? Why didn't he say something? I imagine for a couple of reasons. Number one, maybe it was because he felt like, for me to be a loyal husband, I need to defend my wife no matter what. But beyond that, I imagine he was thinking, if I don't, she will make my life a living hell. And I want no part of that. And if you haven't experienced it yet, what you're going to find in life is there are going to be people who treat you the exact same way. There are going to be people that you trust who will go silent when you need them the most. Now, some of you have stories like that. Some of you can tell stories of a friend who didn't stand up for you even though they knew you were right because they had known the other person a little bit longer. Some of you know what it is like to be punished by a father who knows that you are being treated unjustly, but he doesn't want to be the one that has to sleep on the couch. And some of you can tell a story of a coworker who knows that you're being the one rolled under the bus by the boss, but does not speak a word because they don't want to catch heat. And those are hard, hard situations. It's an all too common experience in life. It's common, but it's nonetheless painful. And it can leave a person feeling abandoned and all alone. Are you alone? Let's pick up the story in Genesis chapter 39 and verse 20 and 21. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. This weekend, I've been reading the autobiography of Martin Luther King Jr. There are a couple of things that jumped out to me. One was he expresses this feeling, this disappointment of seeing people be silent when they know that he and others are being treated unjustly. He speaks especially about the American church. He says one of the greatest pains in his life, far more than the racism that he encountered, was knowing that the white American church saw what was taking place and did not speak a word. And it broke his heart. But what also touched me was he reflected upon his experience of being in prison in Alabama and Birmingham. And he spoke the words that we basically read here. He said, "I'd never been truly in solitary confinement. God's companionship does not stop at the door of a jail cell. God had been my cellmate. When the decision came in room 30 on Good Friday that we must commit a faith act, God was there. He was also present in a Fifth Avenue, New York City apartment where a dedicated young star had worked night and day, telephoning everyone he could think of to demand that they send him some money for bail bonds in Alabama. In the midst of deepest midnight, daybreak had come. I did not know whether the sun was shining at that moment, but I knew that once again, I could see light." It's one of my greatest hopes this morning for those of you who are going through a season in which you've been treated unjustly, and you feel the pain of it, and you feel all alone and abandoned. My hope is just for a moment today, as we've worshiped our Savior, and we're reminded in this text that you're not alone, that in this moment you see the light, that you see Jesus standing right next to you. He's always with you. The question is, are you with him? Too often when obedience results in pain rather than blessing, we turn on God. In those particular moments, we want to hold him responsible for what we are going through. Or maybe we view it as a sign of his lack of care for us at that particular time. And that's exactly what Satan hopes he will do. But this particular text and this particular story reminds us that even in those moments when people are cruel and cowardly towards us, that God is with us and that God is working for us. We read in Genesis 39 of how he was working for Joseph in verse 20 and 21. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. Now, even if you don't blame God for the unfortunate circumstances that you're going through, you're probably going to have to work real hard not to become bitter or even feel bent on getting revenge. It's natural to want to travel one of those roads, but each of those roads, they're really a one-way street towards things like depression and things like anger or hatred, rather. And really, that's not good for you, and it's not good for anyone else. Now, please don't misunderstand me this morning. I am not downplaying the trauma of being treated unjustly. It's when unfair accusations are made about you, when you are penalized in a way that you do not deserve, that is tough stuff. But just because you have been victimized does not mean you have to be a victim. You can take control of your life. You say, how do I take control of my life? Well, one way you take control of your life is by doing this. You do the next right thing. Whatever that is, you just choose to do the next right thing. And that's exactly what we find Joseph doing. Rather than spending all of his time telling people about how he had been messed over by other people, rather than pleading that he was innocent, rather than wallowing in toxic emotions, he made the decision, I'm just going to take care of the people who are in prison right here with me at this particular moment. I'm going to serve them. It's this decision to focus on other people that has helped so many people survive circumstances that were not fair. In fact, if you read the accounts of many of those individuals who survived Nazi concentration camps, you'll hear this truth emerge in their story. That they made the decision, despite the fact they were being treated in horrific ways, unjustly, they just focused on taking care of the people around them. Now, this is not to say there's not a place or a time to plead your case of innocence. It's not saying that you shouldn't ask for help. Joseph eventually did. But he was far more concerned with doing good work in his less than ideal situation. And no different than in Potiphar's house, It wasn't long before he was entrusted with greater responsibility and privilege. We continue the story in verse 22 and 23. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. When you do right only to be done wrong, it's tempting to think, what's the point? I mean, why bother? Maybe I ought to just do what feels good instead. Maybe I ought to do what will get me ahead in life. Everybody else seems to be doing that. Maybe I ought to even the score because that'd make me feel a whole lot better. And those feelings are understandable. And so I want us to remind us from the text, what is the point? The point is this: God has a dream and God has a plan for your life that he is working out. That yes, there might be people in life who mess you over, but there is nobody who can stop that plan that God has for your life, that dream that God has for your life, from moving forward. The only person who can stop that is you. If you make the decision you're going to throw in the towel out of discouragement, if you make the decision you're going to throw in the towel out of anger, you can bring that plan to a halt, but otherwise, God's going to keep moving forward with what he wants to do in your life. So I got to ask, have you given up? Have you given up because somebody did you wrong, stuck it to you, gave up on you? I want to encourage you this morning, if you have, decide today you're going to get back to the work that God's entrusted you to do. If you will, I have no doubt that there'll be kindnesses, there'll be blessings, there'll be successes that eventually come your way. And know this, in the very place that you find yourself right now, the place that you may not want to be, the place that you might think, I don't deserve to be, there is good work for you to do. There are people for you to care for. There are things that you can do to bring God glory. So keep your eyes and your ears open right now. One of those unique opportunities soon came to Joseph in that prison. Two of the men who he had been entrusted to take care of were royal prisoners. They had royal positions. One was the chief baker, one was the chief cupbearer. Now, one of, if not their primary responsibility in life was this. Anybody know? Primary responsibility for these two guys? Make sure the king doesn't get poisoned. That's their job. Not their food, not the wine. Just make sure this guy doesn't get poisoned. For reasons we don't know, the text does not indicate both of these guys land in prison. So one morning, Joseph stops by to just check on these guys that he's been entrusted to, and he discovers both of these guys have a bad case of the blues. I mean, they're just down in the dumps. And he inquires exactly what's going on, why you feel so bad, why are you down? And they share with him, well, we had a vivid dream last night, but for the life of us, we don't know what it means. Now, in Egypt, there were individuals who were entrusted with the responsibility of interpreting dreams. And these guys had books with special codes that they would use to unpack dreams. But these individuals didn't tend to stick around prisons. And so that meant these guys were in a situation where there's a great possibility they will never know the meaning of their dreams. At least that's what they thought. And that's what had them down in the dumps. And when Joseph hears them explain this to him, he says, listen, fellas, you tell me your dreams. I'll share that with my God, the living God. He will interpret the dreams for you. And so they did. Now, if you want to read about their dream, you can read that in Genesis chapter 40. But let me cut straight to the chase this morning and just give you the meaning of their dreams. So, Chief Baker, here's the meaning of his dream. You ready, Chief Baker? Here's what God wants you to know. In 3 days, you're going to have your head lopped off. I doubt that did a whole lot for his emotional disposition. He's probably still down in the dumps, right? He turns to chief cupbearer, though, and says, here's the meaning of your dream. In 3 days, you're going to be restored to your royal position. Now, he shares that good news, and he makes one simple request. His request is this, verse 14 of Genesis 40. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I would love to tell you that is exactly what happened. I'd love to tell you that Joseph was released from prison within days of that chief cupbearer being released from prison. I would love to tell you that when you do right after being done wrong, that the reputation that's been destroyed will be restored. I'd love to tell you that the job that you lost because of an unfair accusation will be given back to you. I would love to tell you that the relationship has just been so damaged will actually be healed. More than anything else, what I'd love to tell you is that if you will stick by God and you will do the next right thing, that all the wrongs that you've suffered will be righted. That's what I'd love to tell you. But if I did, I'd be lying. Listen to how this story played out. Genesis 40, verse 20 and 23 through 23. Now the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Eventually, he did remember Joseph, as we will see next week. But by the time he did, 2 full years had passed. That's a long time when you're going through less than ideal circumstances like sitting in a prison. That's a long wait. And waiting's hard. Waiting's hard if you're waiting for a table at a restaurant or if you're waiting for a package to arrive, but waiting for a wrong to be righted, that's one of the hardest waits that you'll ever go through. And in those moments of waiting for something to be righted, it can feel like nothing good is happening, but I promise you this morning that God is up to good in the waits. He is. It's oftentimes in that deep, painful situation we find ourselves in that God's doing his greatest work in us. That it's in the wait that God deepens our dependence on him and he refines our character. And it's in the waits. And so often we're tempted to ask questions of God. One of the primary questions we're tempted to ask is, how long, God? How much longer, God, until you make things right, until the truth it comes to light, until people know what really went down in this situation? How long? That's the natural question. I want to encourage you this morning to ask a different question. The question we need to ask is, what would you have me to learn in the wait, God? What do you want me to know about you? What do you want me to know about myself? What do you want me to know about this world? What are you trying to teach me, Lord? C.S. Lewis reminds us in his book, The Problem of Pain. God whispers to us in our pleasures. He speaks in our conscience, but he shouts in our pains. Do we have the ears to listen, to hear it? What is he shouting? What does he want us to know? What does he want us to learn? God's working in us, but God is also working for us. He's working for us. He's working to bring about a new opportunity for you, the same way that he worked in Joseph's situation as well. A new opportunity at the right time. I have no doubt that he has that for you. If you're here this morning, you're in one of those seasons of waiting. You feel like you've been done wrong. Maybe it was at work. Maybe it was in a marriage. Maybe it was in a friendship. Maybe it was somewhere else. But you were wronged. You know you were wrong, but you're waiting. The situation is what it is. You're still in pain. I want to impress upon you that God has another opportunity for you, just as he did Joseph. It may come tomorrow. It may not come for another 10 years. And I know it's hard to believe this morning, but know this, God's timing is always right. It was right for Joseph. Even though it took an extra 2 years, it was right for Joseph. It will be right for you. So as you wait, please do this. Keep your eyes on God and do the good that he has for you to do in the place that he has you right now. I know what we're talking about this morning is not easy if you're in the midst of it. And I wish there was something I could say to you today to take away the pain and hurt that you're experiencing right now. There's really no words, but what we can do is that we can journey with you through the hurt by offering you our support, our love, and our friendship, by offering you our prayers.